There's one inside, isn't there, that wants to judge and shame us into change and transformation. And this one's got a lot to answer for, I think. You know, that one that believes if it's just cruel enough, if it's just harsh enough to ourselves, then somehow, miraculously, we'll stop doing all of those bad things that we judge ourselves for. And I've been on this path for over a decade now, and I've started to realize that's not how transformation takes place. Actually, I might go as far as to say that makes things worse because you're completely uptight inside. The sun is beautiful today. Good morning, world. I'm just going to bathe in it for a moment before I continue this conversation. Because if you're honest with yourself, right, all of this self-judgment is coming from a need to be perfect, isn't it? Whatever the hell that means. And you're trying to judge yourself into submission. But as you're doing that, you're also suppressing those desires, those wants inside, those parts of yourself that you judge because somebody told you that they're bad, but that secretly you actually like. And most likely, all of this stuff that you're trying to run away from is probably an escape from that first big trauma. Maybe it was your first breakup or being abandoned by a parent. We're still trying to change ourselves so that we can fit into whoever it was that's hurt us. It's ideals about who we should be. Spiritual journey isn't about self-rejection. Who told you that? The spiritual path also isn't about changing yourself. I think that's something that we need to unlearn. So at the start of the year, on our first call back, I said to my students, look, what if 2026 was the year where we left behind this whole, I'm not good enough and I'm going to use the spiritual journey to try and change me into something that I perceive as good enough so that I feel happy or content with myself. I say, why not just bypass all of that? Because this path is really about accepting yourself and integrating those aspects that you judge as bad because they've been judged as bad by others. It's just shame, isn't it? And shame has its value because it keeps us in line in the tribe. It stops us from being abandoned or killed back in the old days. But that shame is informing our whole life and our whole path in a very, very detrimental way. And social media's made this worse, hasn't it? Because now we don't even need to leave the house to feel shame. Bam, it's on our phone. It's on our laptop. It's on our TV screens if you have one of those fancy TVs that can play TikTok. So, you know, we're almost encouraged by everything to shame ourselves into alignment. And it doesn't work, does it? You know it. I know it. So what if there was a different way? Hint, there is, but it's really hard. It sounds simple, but it is really hard to do in practice, or almost slipped on the ice, and it takes years. But if I promised you fulfillment and a life that you'd love, would you spend years on it? Because it will bring you that. I can guarantee you that. But it's going to take time. Oftentimes we're encouraged to invest, aren't we? Invest in the stock market, invest in crypto. But with the world in such instability, can't think of any better investment than in ourselves, even if it does take some time. Really, this path is about integrating those aspects of yourself that you and others about you have judged into oblivion, making them almost unreachable and unacceptable about ourselves, because to accept them about ourselves might mean abandonment from society or the world. But I'm here to ask you, what would happen if you did actually accept these parts of yourself? What if you did integrate them into yourself and genuinely own them? Do you think your life might get better? And I hope the way that I posed that didn't sound condescending. It's just, in my experience, This is becoming quite obvious that this is how we have to live and move forward, so that we're no longer living in separation inside of ourselves, judging the half of ourselves that we wish we could kill off, because it just makes life harder for us. But the easier way, the direct way, is to stop trying to change ourselves so that we don't get abandoned by life, and instead integrate those parts that we judge into our life and live fully from there. That's where fulfillment lies. Because you're sent, man. You've been brought here to do this work on yourself so that you can be who you really are in your true nature as life actually intended you to be. Now, the spiritual ego at this point is going to say, Jamie, I can't accept that. There are parts of me that just aren't spiritual at all. Who said they had to be? This path is about purification. And guess what? When you purify yourself, so long as you don't take purity into the mind, guess what you're left with? Who you've always known yourself to be before anybody in your life told you that it was bad to be that way. This is all we're really trying to purify, are these lenses, these distortions, these separations in our mind that have been created by the outside world and that we just weren't mature enough to be able to integrate. So yes, you have lots of negative beliefs in you because they've been imprinted on you. And that has created a challenge for you to move through, which is why we do our sadhana. And if you need some, or you've never heard of this term, it's just the practices that you need to grow. Because you need to be able to see things inside of yourself that you can't really see unless you get a level of awareness. And that stuff, because I didn't want there to be any barriers to entry, is free on my channel. Go check it out. Give it a go. Let me know how it is. And if you want some deeper support, there's more resources down below. But first, try the sadhana. But you do have these beliefs, and the challenge is going to be to move through them whilst honoring them, even though they're negative, to realize in truth, in time, that they aren't real. That's the path. You're the path. Your beliefs have been a complete setup. Your mum and your dad set you up so that you could live free. Of course, they didn't know that they were doing that. Most of the world doesn't know that this is the path, right? But because you have these beliefs, that's why we end up moving into coping mechanisms. Insert your coping mechanism here. All of those patterns that you use to avoid yourself, to avoid your life. Drink, drugs, cigarette, etc., etc. But those are just the unhealthy ones. There are so many more subtle ones that we're using, isn't there? The thing is, you're going to have to move through all of these beliefs. And you're going to have to move through all of this karma that's in your system. And it's going to come out in those ways, in those addictive tendencies, in those escape mechanisms, in those coping mechanisms. And we're here judging ourselves, shaming ourselves into believing that I'm wrong or I'm bad because I'm doing those things. But they're just coping mechanisms. And you have to move through them. They are going to have to play out on some level. And we're making ourselves wrong for the path and shaming ourselves for the path that's laid out for us. Isn't that mad? Like, we're taught to judge our own path to freedom because it doesn't look the way that we think it needs to look. But you've woke up, bro and sis, isn't it? You can't go back to sleep. All right, you might dip into a little bit of unconsciousness because these patterns need to be played out and you'll veer off the path. But you've seen something now. You can never go fully back. So the process that has to unfold, can we just let it without shaming ourselves? Because the shame makes our inner landscape even more tumultuous, doesn't it? Because as much as you try and judge yourself or run away or escape the path, you're always going to come back to you, to your unconscious compulsions. Because that's the path for you. Because that's what's been set forth from that storehouse of karma that's still in you from childhood. And listen, it's nobody's fault. Don't go grabbing your mum's hair and pulling it out in blame. They didn't know either. They're on a similar path. You just may not know it. So look, you're definitely not going to judge yourself into change. And if you need to do that more to find that out, the answer's still going to be the same. But I have to let you do it, give you a big kiss on the butt, and allow big karma mama to sort you out in her own way. Or you can do this. Instead of incessantly running away from these aspects of yourself that we seemingly want to reject and make wrong and suppress, even though somewhere deep down, secretly, we like doing them, why not integrate them? And what that looks like is accepting them, meeting them, heck, maybe even indulging in them a little bit. Because they're part of your path. You can't learn the lessons that you're set forth to learn from the belief structures that you've been imprinted upon without moving through the path that's set forth for you. So relax. Do your sadhana. Enjoy your life, please. Because it's only temporary. And if we spend our whole life in self-rejection, we'll look back at the end of our life and go, I missed it all. Why? Because I wasn't able to live my life, my path. I was too busy rejecting it because I thought I needed to be perfect to be spiritual. And this, from what I've learned, is really the biggest waste of our life. And we're using the spiritual journey as the reason why I must reject myself. And it's bollocks. It's all a big lie. The spiritual path is not about that, although it can be a part of the path so that we stop doing it. But ultimately, what this path is really here for is your own liberation. And you can't be free if you're rejecting those core aspects of yourself. And heck, if they're meant to leave, if they're meant to go away as aspects inside of yourself, let them. But don't do it because you believe that they need to change. Just do it because it happens naturally as a side effect of your sadhana practice as you deepen and mature into life. Anyway, that's all I've got to say today. Love you lots. Bye-bye.